Hey, good morning, YouTube. What is going on? We're living in the last days, it looks like. At least the last days of Paris, with all that's going on this weekend. It does look like I would have been. If you watched the news this weekend, things are falling apart quick. I don't know that we can get a more current example. There was an old 90s song about this, I think. At least it rang mine. How's everybody doing out there? Looks like we got a few rolling in already. Smoking Locust, good morning. Was here. He may have already departed. Dad on YouTube, good morning. Roger Wilco's with us. How's things down south? Well, along with Tactical Tony. Tactical Tony living large early in the morning. What's up with that? What's your schedule now, Tony? You working nights or what? But yeah, you may not be able to go see Paris after what's going on this winter. They might just burn it all down with everything that's going on. But we'll check in on this here. I mean, get situated here a little bit and see what's going on. Tommy19's joined us. What's going on? So real quick, before we go back into the burning of Paris and the rest of the country, it sounds like, spreading around nearby as well. Checking in on that weather down there for Tommy Boy. Looks like you guys are getting a good dose or got a good dose of snow. There were people measuring 2 feet all up and down the mountains there. It was weird how it was so isolated. It was just that narrow swath. I guess that's how it was so compact. I guess it was so bad in those local areas. It was so compacted that it looks like it's still snowing on down in the flatlands there too, which is bad for them because they're really not used to it. How much snow did you get, Tommy Boy? He says he's listening in. Maybe he's shoveling snow. But it was a good-looking storm. A lot of power outages. Wonder how people's generators backups worked and whatnot. I saw some funny comments. Up in the mountains, they had like 2 feet of snow, and there weren't power outages. It wasn't that bad, but down around the Raleigh area, they were getting power outages before they really even got snow. They were complaining about the power company being so terrible. But definitely tons of video and images out of there if you hadn't seen them. Some places are a little more used to snow than others. But the current Bug Out Bubbles with us. Hey, good morning. Patron in the Dark. Hey, good morning. How are you? Thanks for joining. Time Boy 9 only got wet. You didn't get no snow, Tommy? You got gypped, huh? Canceled 1,000 flights, so if you wanted to leave, you couldn't. Unless you left early. This was an interesting photo. Snapped a power pole. I mean, I've seen tornadoes snap power poles. But it says here the weight of heavy snow and power lines contributed to this power pole snapping. Thinking the power company should have replaced that pole probably 20 years ago. Might be the problem. I mean, this wasn't a really windy storm. That's kind of unusual to have a power pole snap just from the weight of the power lines, unless it's really compromised prior to. But that was just a good picture. I thought it was a tree at first. Tommy Boy says 35 degrees, no snow. Man, you got the cold weather, but got gypped on the snow. You just got all around messed over, Tommy. You got to move further up in the mountains. But yeah, they got snow, and they're still getting snow. The weather guy headed up there and was reporting and was being treated like a celebrity. Maybe they'll send some snow like that our way. Although the mountains has already got, Sierras have already got snow like this a couple times now, so they're good. This was a good time-lapse photo. One of the areas where they don't get a lot of snow, and they did put the clock out. You can see it start hitting about 1 o'clock and just starts stacking up. That was a pretty good image, time lapse they did on that. By 4, they had a good half foot or more. I think that's only a foot measurement. Is that a 3-foot stick? That's only, I can't see how big that stick is. But that was a pretty good time lapse of the snow accumulation rolling in. They know what people up in Canada deal with all the time, right? Where was this at? A good time. Hey, Alicia, good morning. How are you? Smolo says all the rivers are on the rise there. So you guys got quite a bit of rain out of that southern portion of that. If your bug out plan includes getting across a river, you might be in bad shape about right now. Unless you have a real good watercraft. But that's going to be moving on out, it looks like. This afternoon, it might be gone. Northwest is the only other really weather on the map right now. So it's hopefully clears up enough for those folks down south to dry out. But hey, it's been a good weekend overall, right? At least in the U.S., it was kind of quiet. Although you wouldn't know it from the news, the Paris situation is pretty unhinged, it appeared. Moving on. See what the video rundown here is. Oh, if you've been watching YouTube videos like for the last part of the weekend, have you heard about that new WikiBuy hack? It's like the only ad you ever see.
Shower of tear gas at Place de la République. Raining down on a group gathered after Saturday's Yellow Vest protest swept the French capital. Nearby, some damage to storefronts as police apprehended demonstrators. Similar scenes on the Champs-Élysées as protests wound down. All in all, hundreds were arrested across the city. A successful day, according to the Interior Minister.
The priority was given to arrests, both before the event as well as during. And they were a deterrent. Gas masks, projectiles, knives, sticks, devices were taken away early in the morning, even before the start of the protests.
The majority of demonstrators were peaceful, and 10,000 of them took to the streets of Paris. There were also clashes with the 8,000 police mobilized across the city, on the Champs-Élysées, and elsewhere. Though calmer than last Saturday, more than 100 injuries, and elsewhere.
Now, we do want to take note of this. I saw this in an overhead video. These cats right here are ununiformed. You have random people, and they're organized, obviously, but they're not in the uniforms that are doing this crowd control. I don't. Somebody said they're not gendarmerie, the paramilitary guys. But I want to know who these guys are. I saw an overhead video of them pulling some guys out of the protesters. But when you're bringing in people that look just like any other protester, you're gonna definitely up in the clash. That's very concerning. That's only a way for more people to get hurt, I guess you'd say, because who's going to follow an order for somebody just because they say so when all they're dressed in uniform just like everybody else? They're not. They don't seem to be an official representative of anybody. Like, so who are these guys? And there was hundreds of them like this. Somebody said they were Macron's only select special group or something, but yeah,
on the Champs-Élysées,
that's
and elsewhere.
Going to be interesting. They had firearms in another video I saw.
More than last Saturday, more than 100 injuries, like this one demonstrator hit by a rubber bullet. Protests began over rising fuel prices and now encompass general discontent with the rising cost of living.
Our enemy is not just Macron. Obviously, we'd rather he resign and end these policies. But this anger dates back to 15, 20, 30 years, and it's been a long time since the anger has been growing. Today, it explodes, and I think it's not yet over.
Some have already called for a fifth weekend of protest next Saturday.
That's probably the least excited riot reporter I've ever heard. He must have been standing in a studio just reading from a script. But it says 125,000 demonstrators were around the country with 10,000 in Paris. We don't really see any videos of the stuff outside of Paris. There was a couple of pictures, people getting arrested in other towns that I saw. But what's it like there? Is some follow-up reporting that it'd be interesting to track down. But also interesting is it's spreading to Belgium and the Netherlands, I believe, with the similar protest groups. And it's definitely not going away anytime soon from everything we've seen. Yeah, Bug Out Bubba asks what we think the UN is going to do. From what I understand, they're already there. Or not the UN. The EU, there were EU flagged, basically anti-personnel carrier, armored personnel carriers. In Paris, there was video of that. But what's the UN going to do? I don't know if they need to. The EU is going to take care of it, it looks like. But yeah, Bug Out, their agenda is in trouble there, potentially. I don't know. We'll see how the French hold on here. How many people they're willing to abuse to maintain this status quo. This is an interesting article that was in Bloomberg. It's definitely a left-wing perspective, just from the get-go. It talks about the right wing in Poland and places where they're actually standing up for their sovereignty as being like the backlash to some of the stuff. That's an interesting read. Here's a good quote. You can't make speeches about defending the international order when your popularity is at 20% and there are protesters in the street. It's very difficult to get your credibility back. Yeah, Macron has no credibility, at least in France. All his buddies, I'm sure, at the country club still hang out with him. Alicia says, what's going to happen in France? The UN doesn't have enough physical power. Well, they rely on the member states, and if the member states are willing to do it, Smolo, the Santa Fe River may be shutting down. May shut down the I-75. Really? That doesn't happen very often. That's a lot of flooding down there in Florida, huh? Dad on YouTube mentioned in a chat that an article said 90,000 police had been fielded. Right? There are tons of police were deployed, and probably the ones there's more deployed that weren't necessarily police either. But there were definitely a lot of cops. From what I saw in Paris alone, there were 10,000 protesters and like 9,000 police. The way I look at that, that's good numbers for the protesters. You can overwhelm them because you're able to mass your force, whereas the police have to stay spread out, I guess you'd say. So if they had a specific target in mind or something they wanted to take care of. It's Cookies 2050. Good morning. How you doing? Macron's going to address the country this evening? Here in about 5 hours, it looks like. Okay. Maybe he'll say he's quitting. They can only be so lucky, right? There you go, Dad. Yeah, there was an article about and 80 armored vehicles. That's another key thing. And they were flagged EU vehicles. They weren't flagged French, so they weren't French internal. They were flagged with the EU like they were military. Because if they deploy as part of the EU military, this force, it's not supposed to exist, right? Because the EU is supposed to just be an economic compact and not a union of, like our union. It's not supposed to be like that, but they've turned it into that. It's grown to. That's why people are beside themselves. It's turned into much more than it ever was supposed to be, to everybody's detriment, to the detriment of the people. And one thing I didn't have, I got several articles in the links with this Paris thing. What's up with this? I didn't have a link to the Brexit protests that were going on this weekend. Not nearly as exciting as the stuff going on in Paris, but there was a rally for the Brexit movement in London and around England with the betrayal, basically, or the lack of following the will of their people that's going on in Britain as they try to stay tied in with the EU when we're ordered basically to disassociate with the EU, and they're dragging their feet on it and going to make it as painful on Britain as they can to make the people feel the pain, so they'll want to beg it to go back to the EU, essentially, the way I see it. Lots of pictures here in this AP article. Maybe check out. And one of the big problems too is you got lots of instigators, obviously, within these protest movements. They cause a lot of these fires and stuff. Because, like he said, the majority are peaceful, but all it takes is a couple handful to infiltrate. There was a video of they heard them on video saying this is Paris Antifa attacking protesters. The Antifa they were just wearing solid black as usual, attacking people wearing the yellow vest. You got to figure they were responsible for some of this type of stuff. But yeah, there's not a lot of organized anger. They mentioned that in one article that they didn't seem to have a purpose or have a direction, which is a problem when you get a lot of people that want to show up, but there's not a leader, which is in some respects good if everybody knows what they're going for, if everybody knows the goal and they can act individually. But in this case, nobody knows what the goal is other than maybe to oust Macron. Now, if they want to oust Macron, they need to, how about encircling his place of residence with 10,000 people and see how that goes? Something more organized, more directed, instead of just wandering the streets. The police channelized them a lot into that one area as the day went on. There was some of the way it went down was they channelized them. a lot of the protesters would go through a police checkpoint and get searched. So there was actually some organization, like they weren't all violent towards the police, I guess you would say, especially at first. But definitely concerning when you have the Antifa elements mixed in and the communists who won't, don't like Macron, but they want him to go to beyond where they are now. Extreme government rule law is what they want. The fools. Walter Davis says British figured it took 15 police per protester. French cops are woefully outnumbered. Right, exactly, Walter. They are. Just because you're trying to cover a larger surface area with your police forces. Bubba says, "I think the UN will react with ever more stringent tactics. The EU is an extension." Yeah, it'll all be behind the scenes. It would be nothing official, I don't think, from the UN on that. I mean, they might provide some tacit support, behind the scenes, but nothing overt, probably. So lots of good pictures here on this AP article. It should be linked in your description box as well. And it went well into the night. So here's those guys dressed in just jeans and jackets, and they got the red bands, right? And here they're labeled as French riot police. I wouldn't know they were riot police looking at them. That would be, yeah, if anybody deserves your disdain, it's them. Those are the worst of the worst, the ones that hide among the people to undercut them. Hey, locked and loaded. How you doing, Justin? Good morning. I haven't checked in on you this weekend. What's the New Mexico status? Here's some of the checks. They would get them and search them. And again, these guys are just all wearing civilian gear. Why would, other than these guys having guns, there's no reason to obey what they tell you, right? So they're nothing more than another armed gang roaming the streets. I'd have no reason. And this is what, yeah, bad stuff for the French people there. What else? So lots of good pictures there from France. Lots of things to keep up with. If you weren't paying attention, if you live in Paris and continue to see these cars on the side of the street, it's like, why are you parking on the side of the street? Maybe it's a reporter's car. Maybe the reporter showed up and parked on the side of the road. Like, drive your car out of town, take the train back in. Like, there's so many different ways. Like, you've seen what's going on the last couple of weeks. Why would you park on the street still to this point? Unless, I guess you could just happen to get caught up in it. But that's people that are I guess that's people that just are totally unaware of what's going on. People that are really not prepared for anything and not paying attention. Like getting your car burned on the side of the road when all this is going down when you should have known better. Only leading more of the problems. I guess they could steal the cars and drive them in and put them on fire. There's things that could happen, but today is Green Monday, says Tommy Boy. Eating a salad. Is that right? Today's eat a salad, eat your veggies day. Walter says most EU countries are cool with the state of affairs. If they sent troops, the troops might side with the protesters. Do you mean they're cool with the state of affairs of chaos, or cool with the EU being a corrupt organization. Which one are they cool with? But you're saying the troops might, yeah, that's the thing. The bigger this thing grows, the more that happens, right, Walter? The more that people that are protesting know people on the other side that are supposed to be keeping the peace, right? And they converse, and the conversations that take place afterwards, especially if you get the military involved. Everybody knows somebody. You know, it's a small country too. France is tiny. You know, it's like, it's not as big as Texas, is it? It's a little bit bigger than Texas, but it's tiny in comparison to a lot of other countries. Everybody knows everybody. Hey, Wes S has joined us. What's going on? Good morning. The MSN is coining a new phrase, populist movement. The popular, they kind of went away from nationalist movement. It seems like they're terming a lot of this stuff the rise of nationalism. But it's hard to say what term they want to. They want to find whatever people react to the most as being a negative, a net negative, right? They want people to take it, whatever term the media puts out there, they test it. And they're like, okay, what do people think react to this? So they think of this as a negative. So they keep putting those terms out there. Bubba says, if no cars were there, it wouldn't look like the protests were vicious enough, right? Yeah, if weren't the cars on fire, it wouldn't look nearly as bad. Just have a bunch of tear gas in the streets, right? There was a good video, I don't know where I saw it, where the protesters came in organized. Here's kind of an example. They made a barricade and burned it. But also there was a video of them rolling in with plywood in front of them to block the tear gas, and they would dump that. So here they are deploying a barricade, like to form a barrier, it looks like. Presumably to block the police movement, I guess. But this does, what good does this do, right? Like, what they really got, somebody's got to get organized and like give them direction and be like, what is the goal of this? Because right now you're just wasting your efforts and getting a lot of people arrested as well, without really putting any pressure on the people you're going after, right? Because you're really going after the heads of state. You got to encircle the heads of state. And that was one thing about Brexit. They were right outside Westminster, where May lives, in a couple of their protests, right? That was one of the good things. They really got up in their face. Like, this is where you need to be. That's what the goal is, to go after them. Like, just being out in the middle of the street, in the middle of town, is not the point. They got a bulldozer on the front of that one. Need heavier barricades. I think all they drive is those little bitty tiny can cars over there. It wouldn't be much of a barricade either if they put them out. The populist term was used for the hippies in the 60s. Populist could be a pure democratic movement. It depends on who coins the term, though. This is just the media throwing out terms to see what people don't like, though, I think, because really this isn't a pure democracy movement. At least all of it's not. I mean, some people in there might be, because it's shown a lot of videos or pictures of how diverse the crew is. Like, you got the good anarchist, let me put it that way, because the term anarchist has been misused a lot. But the free market types, the lack of government types, and then you got the violent anarchist on the other side. But you got a range of people in these groups, so it's hard to call it that it has a true meaning, and that's the problem. Nobody knows what to coin it, because it's so, maybe it is a true populist movement in that it's popular. And that's what they fear even more so, is it really is popular. Hey, Billy Bird Outdoors, good morning. How's things down there? Are you wet and soggy like everybody else? Tommy Boy didn't get any snow, so he just got rain. Right, Dad? Yeah, that Dad, they just keep slinging stuff to see what sticks. Yeah, exactly. Once people click on one word, like, oh, that's bad, these people are bad, once they realize that sticks, that's what they'll call the protesters. They'll coin a term for them, and that'll be it. Whatever keeps the people divided, I guess you'd say, because the people uniting against the government, they don't want this at all. And this is very much so more of a organizing against the government than any other thing we've seen probably to this point. There you go, Wes. Yeah, right, Wes. The French said, your people are ours. The French people said, no, we are the French, right? Yeah, and that's a lot of the problems in Germany and other places too, is like, and really you see some of the migration problems in these countries. They're no longer, you can't call Germany anymore, can you? Shouldn't they just change the name? When you got some of the things going on in these countries that are going on, they've lost all relevance to where their names came from. And that's a big difference between here in the United States. The United States was designed to bring in a lot of different people with a lot of different ways of life and everything else. These other countries were never like that. And they've tried to make them like that forcefully, not through a freedom agenda, but through a control agenda, which has caused a lot of Santa getting in the action there, which has caused a lot of even more so the problems. Hey, Prepper Madness, good morning. Consuming your coffee, right on. I'm about finishing mine off too. We need to move on from Paris. We're going to get stuck on one subject. But we did talk about the storm a little bit too. So again, I think we've circled through all the pictures, so we're good here. Wes says he finds himself self-aligned as more of a constitutional nationalist, right? Well, the Constitution is our nationalist identity, right? And if Tommy Boy's checking in, the stock market should be opening right now, and it wasn't looking good earlier. But check out that bond price, 2.85, and we were just at 3.2 a matter of months ago. That's a big, big move. But pre-market is slightly down. But they're everybody's tentative today, worried about what's going to happen. It's interesting, all this. The stock and economic movement doesn't usually happen this time before Christmas, and that's one thing I was noticing is a lot of this stuff. Usually when it gets this close to Christmas, they're trying to make a kumbaya tone. They try to get everybody happy. Everybody go out and spend your money. Everything is fine. This year before Christmas, it's like there's a lot of chaos going on, and that's why it's not being reported a lot in the U.S. They don't want people to think about Paris burning down. They want people to go to the mall and spend money. So there's a lot of that conflicting news going on with the what's going on in reality versus what they want to go on in people's heads. But we'll have to see what happens in these markets continue with this economy continuing to suffer. But there's talk that they're not looking for a story here. Was it in the CNBC? They're not going to raise rates on the coming year. Which will help the stock market. They'll be happy about it, but it's going to cause further pain throughout the economy and inflation and otherwise. But the bond market inversion with the like we talked about, this 10-year bit at 2.85 getting driven down. We saw the 2 and the 3 drop. Was it? The 5-year drop below, and the 2 and the 3 on interest rates, which is part of that inversion. And if the 10-year follows, it's a further bad sign. So speaking of bad signs, they finally did the ruling in South Africa on land misappropriation as the Parliament went ahead and moved forward last week. We briefly talked about it there leading up, but then they moved through, and I wanted to check in on, follow up on that. There's a couple articles in your links. This is out of South Africa, I believe. They're calling it that the National Congress is using land expropriation as electioneering tool. And we've heard that a lot this year, that they're using as just a way to get elected with the urban masses. But they're following through with it too. And their opponents are pointing that out, I guess. So I guess we're in a approved land expropriation bill, which has been approved, is now followed by a 60-day comment period, which I don't know what that does, why there's a 60-day comment period. I don't know how that works in their process, but we have seen this tone that the ANC is faking their concern over the land rights and basically stripping land rights and providing it to the greater use of the people, to everybody's detriment. But the Democratic, what do they call themselves? The Democratic Alliance, which is another political party, it looks like, is putting this out in the paper. So the process of changing Section 25 of the Constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation was still ongoing, and there was no objective reason why the process should be rushed or why Parliament could not consider the proposed constitutional amendments before the bill was passed. So they're talking about the bill they passed last week was just pure political expedience. So again, the accusation is the ANC is doing it to get better election results next year leading up. I think their elections are in January, if I'm not mistaken. It is summer down there, so it's bound to be hot. But there's also an article in the American Thinker that seemed like it might be interesting. Of course, it's going to have a different perspective. But they're quoting the quote from last week: "Your time is up, white people. South African Parliament targets next March for land expropriation." The South African Parliament approved a motion that would set up an ad hoc committee to recommend procedures on how land expropriation without compensation would work. So now they're getting into the nitty-gritty details of how we're going to do this, like who they're going to go after first, right? Who they're going to steal from first and how they're going to do it. So earlier they approved the constitutional changes, and the motion was adopted with 183 for, 77 against. Opposition parties objected vehemently. And so that's pretty good, talking about some of the stuff going on the floor of their Congress. Quote here: "So land must be nationalized and socialized for the benefit of the people, especially the working class and women. Those who oppose want the perpetuation of wrongs of the past." And one of those two wrongs don't make a right, right? Just a second, stand by. All right, sorry about that. Had to check the perimeter. All right, where did I mess up here? Oh, I'm talking about South Africa. So yeah, they're talking about the. I don't know how they're going to fight it. They got the communists firmly in control there, so it's only a matter of time, I would think, unless they just back out of it after some election shenanigans. Maybe they do get told in an election to basically stop it with the results, but it doesn't look good. The urban masses are full on whipped into a frenzy about this whole thing. But there's a couple of good articles in this American Thinker article's one of the better ones. See what I miss in the side chat here. Theodore Underhill, good afternoon, good morning. How you doing? Yeah, LS, South Africa is a hot mess. It's fully in communist control. Hey, Wes. What did you say, Wes? Tactical Tony, did you not work? What's your hours? You a late nighter now or what? I don't know what your hours are anymore. Thanks for checking in, though. Dropping by. We got a thumbs down. Yes, we got a thumbs down. Sweet. We accept all forms of criticism, even if it's only a thumbs down and they can't back up what they think. Just the drive-bys. It happens every now and then. Roger Wilco standing by. Oh, that's probably when I left. Okay, let me catch up here. Kumbaya was banned as hate speech, Walter. Okay, my bad. A few verses around a campfire would solve all the problems, right? Tony doesn't have that many sock accounts. What do you mean? How many are there out there? Oh, should I check in on this? This is like a new record? We're pushing for new numbers, huh? I think my record was like 9 or something. I don't think we've ever hit double digits. Double digits would be like a badge of honor, right? Truth freeze, yellow vest, coyotes, and commies. Hurrah. Yeah. Keep practicing. Yes, Southwest Africa's a big worry for your global takeover. Okay, Wes, good luck with that. Pepper Madness smoked 100 pounds of ham yesterday. He consumed way too much of it. I need to smoke some ham or just get some ham in general, freeze it, smoke it, whatever. I need to get rid of some of these fatties we got running around here. You know what I'm saying. Hey, Steve Foco, good morning. How's it going? Have you checked in on the markets this morning? Or just talk about the bond inversion a little bit earlier, keeping an eye on it. It might not go well for everybody, but just one of those indicators that's good to monitor to keep an idea of what's going on. I have tiny hams, Wes says. Yeah, they eat a lot though. Got some bigger than others. On your imminent death by robot stories, talking about SHTF, imminent any day now. New models go off the rails and deadly malfunction errors. What are the odds? This is in a Daily Star out of the UK, so it's kind of sensationalized, but it's always one of those, yeah, we've been warning people. We told you. Skynet is real. Killer robots could go off the rails and slaughter innocent people thanks to deadly malfunction errors, which could be a virus or pre-programmed, Order 666, right? Order 66, whatever. Military superpowers have been warned. So there's an organization called Campaign to Stop Killer Robots. So this is and specifically focused at those that artificial intelligence that's built for the battlefield, which they're making more and more robots and other controlled drones and stuff for warfare, because it makes it easier to do because people aren't involved. There's no people to disobey, right? So this guy warns that if robots are handed full autonomy, they could wipe out the very people they were supposed to protect, thus Skynet. It is unlikely militaries want to use systems that present these type of vulnerabilities. But as systems get more complex, there's always a risk they may malfunction in unpredictable ways, putting your own forces at risk, like when they become self-aware and realize, we were talking about last week about that computer developing intuition, playing chess. Yeah. Why would you do such a thing? Like, these movies weren't made just because people thought it was a good idea. So waiting for Skynet and everybody to become self-aware and wipe out humanity. Just what we need. Yeah, 10 thumbs down. New record. Right on. So if you're so inclined, give a thumbs up or not. Thumbs down might win this round. So yeah, this guy's, so there's an organization, CSKR, who's against robot warfare, essentially, because of what could happen in the long run. So wise man, probably speaking of the choir, because the military-industrial complex loves easy money. I mean, the military-industrial complex can't replace people, but they can build more robots and get more money. Guarantee you that. It's like, you can destroy all the robots you want. We'll build them as far as the eye can see. But they can only build so much equipment to give it to people, though. They're not involved in the making people business yet, at least, until cloning becomes the new in vogue thing to do. So there are bans on autonomous things like this. They're looking for binding regulations in the form of political declarations led by Germany and France, and negotiations toward a new international law to prohibit the use and development of autonomous weapons systems led by Australia, Brazil, and Chile. So basically, they always have to have a human intervention as part of the system, not fully autonomous. You know, just a drone roaming out there looking to do whatever it wants once it identifies a target of something or some kind. Interesting. So that was my today's Sign of the Apocalypse. Watch out for the killer robots. Who else? We got Gnostic Pasta. I never can say your name, GP. Gnostic Pasta is what I want to say, but there's no S. But how's it going this morning? Is the Chinese woman telecommunications CEO still under arrest? Oh yeah, there was that whole thing, huh? As far as I know, they still had her under lockdown. There was an article last night about China's further threats, I guess, basically, because of that. Yeah, the U.S. is asking for extradition. Yeah, we're trying to extradite because they got arrested in Canada. They got picked up at our request. Right. You guys are way ahead of me on that. Wes kept his C-3PO costume just in case something like this happened. Good call. Prepper Madness is going to use tinfoil and boxes for a disguise. Yeah, that's one thing we don't talk about in prepping, is how we're going to blend in with the robots when they take over. Some different type of camouflage. Be the gray robot, not the gray man. We need to learn how to disable robots, 5G, yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, it'd be better. It'd be good to get on some technical expertise, wouldn't it? Truth. I'm glad my son is better at computers than I am. I don't know that we're quite keeping up with the demand that's going to be needed in a true adversarial environment. Let's put it that way. Wes S needs to have. We need to have 12 gauge with exploding spear point slugs that pierce and then go pow. Robot down. All right. All right. Final news of the day. Prepping for war. This is an ongoing exercise that happens kind of annually, but they've been tracking it and gotten better at it over the years. But basically, it's a Air Force drill of how to project air power and establish basically a forward operating base into a foreign country or foreign area, much like we did in Afghanistan, but more larger, I guess you'd say, on a larger scale. So people that track air movements have an article here about how they tracked this movement over the last week. A lot of it goes on in Nellis outside Vegas, Southern California. A lot of it happened in Texas. But just basically all these planes that get flown in and out of areas, simulating dropping off supplies, logistics, people, and all the things that would be needed to, fly into basically the backyard of China and to start, start the warfare plan, basically thing. What do they call this? It's called Joint Forcible Entry Exercise. Forcible entry meaning just what you think it means. But it's a very interesting study of the amount of force power that our government has. I mean, it's a very large movement of all types of aircraft. They, figure all the things that would be required to fly into a country forcefully and suppress their enemy air defense, suppress their air support, and everything else that would be required to do that. All has to go into that. It's not just going to be a bunch of transport planes, They got to get all the other planes that are wrapped around them. So here's an example they're tracking. They got 18 C-130s flying over Texas at one time, in line, basically, following the same path. Another example is C-17s out of Nevada into California. This is a very interesting example of warfare testing, if not planning, and what really you figure it's not even close to the full complement that could be put and projected, into Upper Mongolia or somewhere if needed or if requested. It's a lot of air power going on. So that happened in the last week or so with that exercise, and it's just the link was on the Drudge, and they were talking about it briefly on over the weekend. And some people freak out about it, thinking it's another Jade Helm type thing, which it kind of is. It's just the Air Force version of Jade Helm, where they practice their exercise of what they're going to do for warfare. But it's interesting to see how many planes and the movements and stuff and how they simulate going into a foreign country just by keeping everything internal here. So that's kind of wraps that up, folks. That's what I had picked out. It's all the links are in your description box. Hope everybody has a good week. And everybody in the North Carolinas, Tennessee, Virginia there, dig out of that snow you got. And hopefully be able to dry out before the next round comes in, or maybe that snow will hang around for Christmas. You never know. Hey, Jay Sparks, what's going on, sir? How you doing? Hope you had a good weekend. You're getting things figured out, sorted out. LS, does the Navy always give big bonuses for signing on? Been seeing commercials lately. It ebbs and flows, LS. It goes in cycles. Sign-on bonuses are just dependent. Usually that sign-on bonus is very targeted for certain skilled people. Your average bosun's mate's not going to get a sign-on bonus, but your radar technician or somebody probably does. Aircraft maintenance guys, stuff like that. Just depends on what they need. Wes S is gonna fear all cars in the street. Maximum overdrive, right? Was a metaphor. Oh, it was from a meteor. Oh, the movie premise, yeah. Man, there's an old one. Maximum overdrive, right? Yeah, LS. If your car has OnStore, they have lots of power already. Yeah, don't get anything that's connected to the net in your vehicle. They can be hacked. Yes, I think that's happening. Truth says Governor Brown wants to tax folks for PG&E. I think that's happening. Sparks can probably confirm, but they're going to cover PG&E's cost with the taxes of the people. Absorbing corporate, at the definition of corporatism right there, absorbing corporate loss by public means. That's pretty sad, isn't it? Oh, goodness. Keep it to yourself, Billy Bird. All right, folks, have a good day. We'll see you later. See you about on the YouTube. Live free.